What's up, guys, and welcome to the OneTake podcast, where we talk about movies, TV shows, and other stuff every week. Today, we are talking about Raised by Wolves Season 2, which just wrapped up a few days ago. I did my review, but I invited my friend Shataz here to help me do a deeper dive and evaluate the season overall. So, I'm Gil, and like I said before, this is my friend Shataz.
Gil, thanks for having me.
Of course, and I didn't know you watched this show until about a week ago.
I love this show, and
Yeah.
I think I found it thanks to your videos.
Look at that.
Yeah.
HBO.
absolutely.
The screeners paid off.
There you go.
But yeah, as soon as I found out you watched this show, I knew I had to get... Shataz in our circle of friends, he's known as the guy with the golden voice.
I mean, that's too kind.
No, listen to that. But as soon as I knew you were into Raised by Wolves, I figured I had to have you on, and you were the man to help me do this. So for today's conversation, we're basically going to do a little bit of just overall thoughts on the season, what we liked, what we didn't, and then we'll spend a lot of time, I think the majority of the time probably, on theorizing. Because that's a lot of the fun for this show is coming up with theories and trying to figure out the puzzle of everything that's going on. And I should say on that front, I'm curious, by the way. So when you watched these episodes, did you stick around for the after credits, behind the scenes stuff?
Not all the time. Not all the time. I mean, I've watched most of this season actually while I was traveling on the road. So by the end of a long day, right, I'll turn it on in the hotel room, that sort of thing. But I caught a couple of them. I watched the last few.
Yeah.
Because, episodes just kept getting better and better and better. So,
Right.
Yeah, but not all of them. No.
So yeah, the reason I asked is because I wasn't at first. And then based on some of the comments I was getting, I realized that they were actually dropping some hints.
Okay.
Or at least where there were things that were kind of alluded to in the episode, they would kind of clarify in the behind the scenes stuff.
Okay.
So I did just want to mention when we get into theory territory, we're going to be pulling from the behind the scenes stuff and hints that we got in some interviews with Aaron Guzikowski and that kind of thing. So if you're one of those people that only wants to go based on the text of the show itself, that's just your warning that, we're going to be using whatever we can get our hands on.
Yeah.
But let's get into our overall thoughts on the season. I guess, so you recently watched season 1 and caught up.
I watched season 1, probably like 3 or 4 months ago.
Gotcha. Okay,
Yeah.
So having seen them both I watched season 1, then it was a year or so before the next season. Having watched the two of them kind of close together, what did you think of season 2 overall and kind of how it compared to the first season?
Oh, I loved season 2. I mean, I think in terms of how it compared, I think the pacing was obviously very different, right? I mean, you had 6-7 years kind of go by in the first few episodes of the first season.
That's right.
Whereas this second season was just much faster. I mean, in some cases, you didn't even know how much time was going by, but it seemed to be much quicker. But I loved it. I mean, it's just, it's food for your imagination every single episode. And it gets weird and dark, and it's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I remember the conclusion to season 1. Everybody was trying to guess what was Mother going to give birth to. And I don't think anybody thought it was going to be a giant flying serpent. But that's exactly the kind of just weird, memorable stuff I want to see on this show.
Yeah.
And that to me is the world building, the fact that this does feel like a really well thought out world. There's a whole history that we only see little slices of. And sometimes that can feel like, on a lesser show, it would feel like they're making it up as they go along,
Right.
the little bits you see. But here it does feel like they've thought through this entire alternate history, and they're just showing us little pieces of it. So I love that world building. In the mystery, the question marks of what's going on, sometimes it gives me Lost vibes, where that
Yes.
show is all about, what is the smoke monster?
Absolutely.
What is this island? But versus Lost, the mysteries on this show just have this more important feeling to them.
Yeah.
It feels like if we can unlock the mysteries of Raised by Wolves, we would unlock the mysteries of something relating to our origins as a species or our place in the universe. It feels like a weekly dose of Isaac Asimov or Arthur C. Clarke.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just good sci-fi.
Absolutely. And Lost, I mean, everyone knows it kind of lost its way. I mean, talk about a show that was just trying to figure things
Yeah.
out as it went along. I mean, this you feel that, the writers, they have a vision, right? That they're going to bring it together.
Right.
I have that confidence.
That-
Assuming HBO renews for a third season.
I know. And in the behind the scenes for the last episode, I forget who it was, but one person on the crew did make a comment where they were like, we'll see where this goes in season 3. So they at least feel like there's going to be another one. It's season 1. Before the season even wrapped up, they announced the second season. So HBO Max, we're waiting,
We're waiting, get on it.
You could DM me on Twitter, give me the exclusive scoop, I'll announce season 3. So the word you used, vision, I would say is the main draw for me on this show. It does feel like a unique vision. It looks different. When we say it looks weird, part of that is it expands your imagination. You see things you're not used to seeing, and you feel like you are seeing a unique vision from Aaron Guzikowski with a hand from Ridley Scott.
For sure. I mean, just the way that Mother gave birth, right? I mean, you can kind of, to the serpent anyway. I mean, you can see the influences from Ridley Scott.
Definitely.
And like you said, the world that they've built, it's beautiful, it's stunning, it's, again, dark, it's awesome. I mean, this is one of the best shows I think I've watched in a while. So
Yeah.
I'm excited for, again, season 3. I think they said they have, again, a vision through season 5. Right?
That's right, yeah. Aaron has kind of consistently said that if he had his way, this would be a 5-season show. So yeah, hopefully we get to see more. I think we will.
Yeah.
If I were to point out the one place where I kind of have some friction with this show, it would be the fact that the main draw of it, I would say at this point, is that puzzle mystery aspect. I'm very intrigued by the show. The part that I wish worked a little bit better for me, a lot of critics will point out that the best characters on the show are the androids, and I completely agree with that. I connect very strongly with Mother. I always understand kind of what she's going through, watching her emotional journey, having to effectively kill her own child because they think it's a danger to the rest of them. All of that stuff is great. The problem is that the show does sometimes venture to focusing on the humans. And when it does that, that's where I start to disconnect a little bit.
Yeah.
For example, Sue, I thought she was one of the strongest characters.
Absolutely. I mean, she was great. And I think, again, maybe it's, I made a comment earlier about the pacing. I think part of the pacing doesn't really allow for a ton of character development for the human characters. And also the androids are just so much more interesting. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's, and especially now that they've kind of discovered another android and, or an ancient android. Clearly, I mean, they're building that up, right? And the role that they play with humanity, right, side by side. So
humanity, it feels more and more like humans are pawns in this game between grandmother and the entity,
right?
And who knows what else?
But Sue, I'm with you. I think Sue was one of the best developed characters,
right?
And just her story is so just tragic, right? The way it kind of panned out, but then there's some notable characters like Marcus, right? Hell of a character, like so interesting. Every episode, right? There's something you want to see what he does next.
He is a fun character, and I feel bad for him by this point with how many times it's like, okay, Marcus, you have power. You're in touch with this soul being,
right?
And not anymore. Yeah. You're back on the bottom. Okay, now you're back on top. You've got this power. Okay, not anymore. And now you're an undead, upside down, whatever. We'll get to that in the theory section.
Yeah. I do have a theory on that I want to float by you, see what you think.
Oh, yeah. So Shataz came in here very confident. He was like, yo, I've got a couple theories I know you don't know about because you didn't mention them in your video. So Shataz is going, I expect my socks to be over there, knocked off by the end of this episode.
We'll see. You're the pro. But again, I'm excited to float these ideas by you, get your take. So.
Yeah, my take, my one take.
That's right.
One more thing I want to say about Sue, though, is that she was one of my favorite characters. And where did her arc go? I feel like when it got to the most interesting part, where this person who has staunchly been a non-believer suddenly now has reason to believe. And she's conflicted, of course.
Right.
But to me, it did feel like she was starting to have true faith and belief in this entity because it gave her son back.
Right.
And then she turned into a tree. And my feeling is that we could be wrong. My feeling is that she's gone.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, the only thing, and I was thinking about this as I was walking over here, in the last episode, the tree kind of comes back, right?
That's true.
It found its way out of the serpent's, carcass, if you will. So is Sue in there somewhere? Probably not, right? Because I think in the prior episode or the one before that, when she's kind of communicating through that radio, her life force, if you will, is waning, right? Like the heartbeat starts to slow down. Paul even points that out. Say, hey, I can't hear her anymore. So maybe she'll come back, but
She
I don't know.
could. So,
We'll
yeah,
see.
to your point, it did feel like somehow her consciousness was still in there, in that tree.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it was so horrible to hear her on that radio. She was saying, "Burn me."
Right. Horrible.
Which even that phrasing, it does sound like she identified specifically with that tree. So with it having been consumed and then the serpent having been destroyed, she could be dead, but yeah, maybe she is still in there somewhere. Maybe she could show up again like Tally did in season 1 a few times.
Yeah, that's right. As some sort of force. I hate to use the word force, but
Force ghost.
something like that.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. We'll see.
But did you have a favorite episode or a favorite moment that you can think of for this season?
I think again, it was a great season. It was packed. I think my favorite moment was when Father, after he discovers kind of the remnants of grandmother, and when he says that it's millions of years old. For me, that was like a holy cow moment, right? Because like we knew that obviously there was a civilization on Kepler 22b. Like we knew that, right? And early in, I think, the first season, you start to see those hints.
Right.
But you didn't really think that it was millions and millions of years old.
Yeah.
So I think that just sets up all kinds of possibilities for what we're going to find out about the Technocrats, the Believers, what happened there, why grandmother exists,
right?
Why all of this exists. So I think that was probably my favorite kind of individual moment because it just opened up so many possibilities, and it goes back to that puzzle, right? It's just even more complex now,
right?
So that was really cool. I think another really interesting moment was when the serpent ate the tree, and that was what weaponized the serpent, which is crazy.
Yeah,
because again, I mean, talk about a moment that you didn't see coming. I think what the show does a really nice job doing is you always anticipate something's going to happen, right? You can kind of like get a sense of, okay, this is probably going to happen, but you never really anticipate it happening in the way that they ultimately showed it.
Yeah.
And I think that was a great example. Like, they were setting up the tree in the prior episode. Sue turned into the tree.
Right.
I never expected the serpent to come and like eat the tree.
It's cool though, because you think back on it and you're like, well, they kind of set it up. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Because you know that the entity cannot penetrate the EMF zone.
Right.
So of course it's going to try and find a way in. And we've seen hints that the entity is underground, or we've had reason to think that with the pits and everything.
Yep.
So a tree. And then we heard about Botanitech.
Yep.
So we should have looked at that tree and said that is some combination of biology and technology. And it was a way to suck power out of Kepler 22b and essentially feed it to the serpent.
Yeah.
And the way it was animated, this was something pointed out in the behind the scenes, is you see the branches of the tree or the roots of the tree come into the serpent and then kind of come back out as its tentacles.
Yeah. Yeah. So I thought that was very cool. So I think those are two of my favorite moments when you kind of confirm that this ancient android is ancient, like really, really ancient. And then when the serpent got weaponized. And
grandmother was, that for me, that was probably also up there. It's so intriguing because not only does it give you an idea of how old the civilization is, but she's an android, which means unlike an ancient skeleton human, this is actually something you could turn back on.
Yeah.
So all season you're waiting, okay, I can't wait to see what grandmother has to say.
Right.
She's the only one that she existed back then. She can answer all of our questions, which makes me wish I could just speak to her and ask her some of these questions, or some of the characters would ask her these questions.
Right. And maybe because the main characters are kids, human characters are kids, and they're not asking the questions we want answered. Right. And neither are the androids, because they've got a different, set of
mother and father want to take care of their children. Yeah. They want to know what they're dealing with right now.
Right.
They're not like us, where I don't think they're all that interested in the history of the last thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of years.
No, not at all. I mean, even like, and I think you pointed this out on one of your reviews, is again, like, not early, but towards like the end of the first season, middle to end of first season, you start seeing these relics. And these these like tarot cards or these metal cards. Right. So you knew that there was something like, some sort of advanced civilization there, but they never really like make a big deal about it. They're like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, it's this thing.
I know.
No one really acknowledges this
Right.
thing.
It's like if we stepped onto Mars and found anything that looked
Anything.
remotely man-made. I saw a picture from the Mars rover that vaguely looked like it was in the shape of a penguin.
Yep.
And that sent the internet into an uproar.
Absolutely.
So if we saw something that was unmistakably metallic with patterns etched into it,
Encrypted data.
yeah.
Yeah, it'd be
a mind-blowing discovery.
monumental discovery. It would change the course of humanity.
Right.
But they just kind of
Now, so I did think about that afterward. And I think I even talked about this in the review. But this is an entirely alternate history. Now, we don't know where it branched off.
Yeah.
I think that was actually one of the questions I asked Aaron in my interview was, should we think of this as an entirely separate world from our own?
Sure.
Or should we say that through 2021, that world is the same as ours? He didn't want to answer that.
Yeah.
But there are a couple of key differences we know. We know that humanity has necromancers, and they know it's a technology they don't understand. As far as they know, it was handed down from Saul, basically.
Right. Through the scriptures. Right?
So if you don't buy into religious faith, then you would look at that and say, it's definitely aliens. Aliens gave that to us.
Right.
So by the time they get to Kepler 22b, they might be a little desensitized to that idea.
No, I think that's it, right? I think that's it, because you're right. Had they not been desensitized to it, I think it would be, it would be a mind-blowing reality that they found themselves in.
And I think that goes to where I have a little bit of a hard time connecting to the human character is because they so often don't act the way we expect a person to act.
Right.
And sometimes it's this. It's just that they live in a totally different reality from us. So of course they're going to behave differently.
Yeah.
And the one in season 1 that bugged me a little bit was that, to our understanding, this is the last of humanity. Earth is scorched. It's the post-apocalypse, and nobody seems all that broken up by it.
No.
But again, they're raised on the atheist side. These are child soldiers that were raised in a really tough environment.
Right.
So maybe they wouldn't react to it the way I would.
Yeah, and like the children, I mean Campion, right, as an example, like he doesn't know anything else.
Right. He was raised here.
He was raised on the planet by 2 androids. So of course his world view and his, view of things is very different than what we would be able to, I think, try to relate to. 'Cause we just can't. So
it's funny that you bring that up because that was the original premise of this show. If I go back to the first couple of episodes, the main draw was what happens to a kid that was raised by robots? And we've come so far from that point. The show is not remotely, I mean, that's still there. That's some of it.
Yeah.
But the show is a totally different landscape from what it was back in season 1.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And that's why it's funny that you brought up Lost, because I remember thinking the same thing earlier this season, right? The black smoke monster is kind of like the serpent, right? They're on this, not like a lost island, but like pretty much, right? They're in the middle of nowhere, right? With no other connection back to Earth. There's another population or community of people on the other side, right? The others. So a lot of analogs. But yeah, I just hope it doesn't lose its way, right? In a similar way that Lost did. And I don't think it will. Again, going back to our earlier comments, like it sounds like they've got a vision, right? A view of how this is all going to get tied together. And I'm pumped for it. Can't wait to see it. So.
If I go to a couple of my favorite moments from the season, for me, it was overall episode 5. And that was the episode where it really leaned into horror. And I love horror, and I especially love sci-fi horror. When you get into some of the good Ridley Scott vibes, that stuff is my favorite. So in that episode, you had Vril coming back as a killer. So an android with its face ripped off, just slaughtering people.
Fantastic.
So good.
So good.
In the same episode, you have Marcus go underground, where you see that vaguely human-looking thing come back to life and then immediately devolve before him. And by the way, I did see a few people wondering, what is with those people? Because they don't look exactly human, but they look human-ish. And Aaron Guzikowski has talked about this. He might have even brought it up in our interview, I forget. But those are basically humans that are caught in the in-between step. So they are something between a real normal human and the bipedal creatures that they turn into. So somehow there are a group of people that were able to stave off the devolution, but not entirely. So they're stuck somewhere in between. And I have some thoughts on how they did that. We'll get to that in our theory section.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's such a great scene too, because again, like you feel like almost, the walls kind of closing in on you, right? The claustrophobia of that moment. And then the tooth, right? Like
The
the tooth of Romulus, and how
yeah.
that kind of immediately devolved that humanoid, creature or thing into a creature. So many questions, but that was a great episode.
Yeah.
And again, another example where you kind of knew or had suspicions of how things were going to play out there, but the way they executed it, never really saw it coming in that way.
Yeah.
Like Vril coming in and just slashing people up, like that was awesome.
I'm going to make you like me.
Unbelievable. So good. So good.
Yeah, so that was my favorite. And I feel like I want more of that. I would love for the show to lean a little bit more into horror.
Yeah.
Because it is overall a pretty terrifying situation when you think about it. They are on this unknown planet where there are unknown creatures of a variety of unknown creatures running around. Right. I mean, the mermaid thing, when it comes out of the water to take Tempest's baby, that's terrifying.
Terrifying. And it puts it into its, sorry, not to cut you up, and it puts the baby into some cavity within, itself so that it could, I guess, be protected from the acid water.
Right.
Right. Didn't see that coming.
No, that's another great example. I would put that on the same level as mother giving birth to a serpent.
Yes, out of her mouth.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Important detail. Just so much weird, creepy stuff that in reality would be horrific. Yeah. So when they lean into that tone, I think that kind of corrects some of the issues I was describing earlier, where the main outcome of me not connecting with the characters is that I'm not feeling as much of what they're feeling.
Sure.
When you lean into horror and I feel some of their terror, now I'm connecting with them again.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think you're right.
And I think the finale did a little bit of, there were definitely a few horrific moments in the finale too, that were a little bit of a different style. Mother in the Veil, when it just starts to take over her entire body. And then the follow-up to that, where grandmother is holding her mouth shut while mother is just screaming in terror. Yeah. And then you see the close-up of grandmother's face. So definitely, and then of course the final image of Marcus. That feels right out of a horror movie.
Absolutely.
Hanging upside down, blood dripping onto Lucius.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The upside down crucifix. I mean, there's so many ways that they can take this. Great way, I think, to end the season.
Yeah. Agreed. Any other, before we just get into theories, any other observations you'd point out just in terms of overall thoughts on the season, things that struck you as interesting, or just anything else you want to mention?
I mean, everything was so interesting. One thing that I'm glad that they did was they brought back another one of these temples.
Oh, yeah.
Right? When, like you said, in that episode where Marcus goes into one of those pits, I thought that was great. I think they did a lot of, nice ways to kind of tie it back to things that they were teasing in the first season. Again, the tarot cards is a great example, right? They found those in the first season, but you never really saw what you could do with it until, Father just casually kind of scans it, and it shows that video of, what happens when you kind of take the seed.
Oh, yeah, which, by the way, that was another horrific moment.
Yeah.
You see a tree explode out of this person.
Yeah.
And that's so tragic. That happened to Sue.
Oh, absolutely.
My favorite character.
Yeah. Which I think was a great way that they, because at that point you knew, right? You kind of knew what happened to Sue, but then you got to see it, which I thought was
just so matter of fact.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that was an interesting moment as well, because another example of how it's just so matter of fact. Like they have, I think 7, right, of those different cards, 7 distinct cards.
Oh, the tarot cards?
The tarot cards that we've seen anyway, 5 or 7, I forget. But then that was the first time that Father was like, oh, yeah, you can scan these and I'll show you a video.
Well, we've seen it. So back in season 1, we did see Mother scan one of them.
Okay.
That's when we got the image of that. It looked like a mini pentagonal temple with a thing sticking its head out of it, spitting white blood everywhere.
That was after she scanned it? Okay.
Yeah,
I must have missed
she scanned
that moment.
it, and that's what gave her the that sort of flashback.
Okay. Okay, I missed that. But what about the others? Why don't they scan the rest?
Well, so
to learn more about.
I think there was an offhand line at one point where they said oh, this one is intact enough to be read. Like a lot of them are damaged.
Okay.
I think.
Okay.
It does give you that feeling of just go to grandmother and just ask her to let's just sit down for 5 minutes. Tell me everything.
Tell me everything.
Scan those cards.
I'm dying to know. So I thought that was odd, but I guess you kind of explained it now, so maybe it's not so odd. But I really do like how they are setting up the whole. The role of the androids. Are they gods or were they perceived as gods? Right. When that one little girl gave the woman at the the black market,
Lamia the serpent killer,
Lamia the god. I thought that was a great way to kind of tee up not just next season, but also to kind of give you a sense of how does that tie into kind of the mythology and, the belief system of the technocrats and the believers, millions of years ago or however long it was. So again, really excited to see how that kind of evolves and plays out. But again, the entire show was great. It was fun. You never really, again, the entire season was gripping, I thought. There was never a period where things felt slow or that they dragged on. You were rewarded with every single episode, which is a good time.
Yeah. I agreed. And the one other thing I'd add is you kind of forget about it because it was early on in the season, but the trust, the Atheist supercomputer, I was so surprised that didn't play a bigger role in the season. Yeah. I almost thought it was going to end up being an antagonist to Mother, where both of them are sort of very advanced AI. But Mother was able, once she got her eyes back, was able to take out the trust pretty early on. But I did want to say, just visually, I thought the trust was so cool.
Very cool.
Because you have to imagine, what does a super advanced computer look like thousands of years from now? And they came up with this great mix where it looks like biology and technology. You can't really tell.
Yeah.
It just looked so cool.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, and we only had the trust for a few episodes. But you're right. But I guess for me, I thought of it as kind of like a parallel to the entity. Right, it's an AI that's dictating or providing guidance in terms of what to do. So maybe there's something there too that they'll kind of play up.
Well, I think that's a great bridge to get into theories.
Perfect.
Because the way you referred to the entity there as an AI, I think a lot of us are kind of taking for granted that the entity is some kind of AI.
Yeah.
But let's just start there. What is the entity?
So I think, and this is what I was like really proud to kind of share with you, I think the entire planet is Botanitech. And I think, the moment where Mother kills the serpent and you see the electromagnetic field kind of fracture or tear, and you see that hexagonal kind of technological looking pattern in the sky. So I was like, okay, that looks like technology. So where I kind of went with that is, okay, maybe the entire planet is Botanitech, and the core is a dark photon processor. And that's what the entity is. Right, and because it resides, I think we know at this point, or can assume at this point, that the entity lives in the center of the planet.
I think so. It's been implied.
It's been implied.
And then in the last episode, you had Marcus and Paul. At least they believe that's the case. That it resides underground.
Right, and I think there are clues. Right, like we were just talking about the tree being kind of this like conduit or like a lightning rod almost. Right,
and the fact that Tally only appeared as a ghost after she fell into the pit. The other children died in other ways. None of them appeared. She's the only one who fell into a pit, which you would think gives the core or the entity access to her remains.
Yeah, exactly. And if you think about how Mother would weaponize herself, right? Her eyes, which have the dark photon energy. The serpent weaponized itself by eating the tree, which is a direct link to the entity, or the, what I'm saying is this dark photon core. I don't know. I think there's something there. Yeah. So I'm eager to hear what you think about that.
No, I basically agree with all of that.
Okay.
I think the one thing you said, which I wasn't already thinking, is when you said the entire planet is Botanitech.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of it in exactly those terms, but I think you're essentially right. If you're going to say the entire planet is a supercomputer, they gave us the terminology for it this season.
Yeah.
Botanitech. And I think, so when you see that kind of pattern in the sky, I believe that's the EMF being damaged by Mother. And now the EMF, do you think that's a product of the entity, or did humans build that to protect themselves from the entity? Because that's how it acted as a protective shell, right, against the entity's signal. And in fact, it had to find a way through using the tree.
True. No, you're right. And I think then you bring up, who is serving the entity? Is it the technocrats or the believers, right? Because for me, I go back and forth on that. And maybe it's because there are two opposing forces on the planet, right? There's what we consider to be soul. Maybe that's the entity or something else. And the reason I say that is I think there are times where you see kind of conflicting agendas take place. Like Grandmother, for example. I think at the last episode, you kind of see that her agenda is to make humans simpler and happy, right, by devolving them.
Right.
All this time, I was thinking that soul was the driving force behind the devolution of human beings.
Same here.
But clearly that can't be the case, right? I would think that Grandmother was built by the technocrats, and the believers were the followers of the entity, right? So maybe that's...
So, a couple of interesting things there. So one, who created the entity?
Right.
And the way grandmother talks, it's as if the entity is this third party that they don't fully understand. She acts, if you were to take everything she says at face value, which I don't know that you necessarily can, but if you were, to me, it sounds like the entity is this thing humans don't understand, like as if it was there already.
Yeah.
But I think we all assume, or do you assume this, that the entity was created by someone, or was it just there?
Just there.
That's what you think.
I like to think it was just there, because I think that would make for a more compelling situation.
Right.
That it was just there. But I also really like your point around, if humans created this and then they tried to protect themselves from it, I think that could be really interesting.
Yeah,
as well.
I think someone created it.
Yeah.
Just because it would be really hard to understand how an organic being could create technology, though I guess we are organic beings that created technology. I guess there is nothing to say that there couldn't be a living planet out there somehow, and then it created technology, or we introduced technology to the Kepler-22 and B environment, and it sort of repurposed some of it. I guess that's a possibility.
That's a possibility.
The theory I've kind of had since early in season 1, and I haven't really changed from this yet, is that somewhere in the ancient past, somebody created technology. They created artificial intelligence, much like the Trust. And you know the theory about the singularity, where eventually we will create artificial intelligence that is so powerful that it can create better artificial intelligence than we can. At that point, the AI and machines will rapidly advance to a point where we can't keep up with them.
Sure.
And eventually it would reach a point where the machinery, the technology looks like a god to us. So I've always sort of assumed that's what the entity is.
Yeah.
It's the end of that long chain, whether it was humans that started it or someone else. It's even possible, and I floated this idea in one of my videos, that human beings kind of created the spark for it. They created some early AI. It advanced itself so rapidly, maybe inside the core of the planet, so we didn't realize it. And then all of a sudden, the next time we bump into our old friend, it looks like soul, it looks like a god, and we don't even know that we created it.
Yeah. So then do you think the Technocrats created this AI or this technology that became the entity?
I guess my gut says yes.
Yeah.
But almost only because their name Technocrat says to me that they were very technology focused.
Right.
So they would have been the ones to create it.
Okay.
But maybe they created it and then the entity was repurposed by the believers.
Sure.
Because maybe the Technocrats were skeptical of it, but the believers saw it as a god.
That could be.
Yeah.
That could be. And maybe we saw signs of that with that little girl when she said, Lamia the god.
Right.
Right. Clearly, Lamia's technology. This is an atheist community. And I think grandmother even made a comment around
they're going to look for belief.
They're going to look for
but those
belief.
prayers will go unanswered.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe that's how it kind of connects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the origins of the entity, I think we both agree on the nature of the entity.
Yeah.
Basically, the Kepler-22b, the planet, is a supercomputer.
Yes.
It is what is the word? Botanitech.
Yeah.
What does the entity want?
So this is where I go again, like there could be multiple opposing forces at play, right? Because I don't think that grandmother is doing the bidding of the entity. I mean, she's made it kind of clear, right? She's devolving human beings to protect them from the entity. So if she was created by the Technocrats, and if the believers are doing the bidding of the entity, right? This is kind of where I go back to, like, you know, what are these two kind of diametric kind of forces? Because I do think it's push-pull. So I think that's one piece. I don't know. I don't know.
That's a long way of saying.
Long way of saying I don't know. But I love, again, there's so many possibilities. And I also want to learn more about, you know, who, I'm assuming a lot of the mythology and like the relics and the rituals were being orchestrated by the believers. But also it's highly technological at the same time too, right? So I'm interested to see how, exactly like you said before, did the believers, was this some sort of like religious like cult that spun off of this, you know, civilization? So
which of those, where do you draw the line to Mithraism on Earth? Because the Mithraic are the ones who use the Necromancers.
Yeah.
And so you would think that came from the Technocrats. So is it some kind of a reversal where on Kepler 22b, the Technocrats eventually lead to the Mithraic, and the believers eventually lead to the Atheists.
Yes. I think that's what I'm getting at. I think you put that really in a really nice way because it was in Mithraic scripture that they found the ability to tap into, dark photon energy,
right,
and ultimately create these, weapons of war. But again, grandmother, you would suspect is like the first or a very early necromancer, right? She has, we'll see, right, what her powers are.
Well, they definitely try to hint that she looks, and when her and mother both float into the air and grandmother kind of turns gold, mother turns bronze, they're definitely, and actually they explicitly say that mother and grandmother have a very similar structure, but where mother's systems are weapons,
right,
grandmother's are something else.
Yeah.
They don't really know what it is.
They don't know what it is. So, yeah, no, it's fascinating. Again, eager to see how it comes together.
What's easy to forget is that in season 1, Mother actually had a conversation with the entity. And that's actually one of the reasons why I've had my suspicion, or that's one thing I've used to reaffirm my suspicion that the entity is technology-based. Because the most articulate we've ever seen the entity was in the sim, when it is interfacing with a computer, basically. And it wore the face of Campion Sturges. So Mother actually spoke with the entity, and what it said is that humans have no future. He said to Mother, no matter how hard you try to keep them safe, they will always destroy themselves. And he says, what you're carrying inside you, so what we eventually find out is the serpent, that has always been the mission. Campion and the others were just a rehearsal. The future of humanity is growing inside you. The vibe that has always given me is not, I want to destroy humanity, but I want to give birth to the next evolution of humanity. And Campion also says, when he first sees Mother, again, Sim Campion, who we assume is the entity, he says to Mother, I missed you. I've been alone for so long. And then in the finale of season 2, Grandmother says that once we devolve everyone, the entity will go back into hibernation, basically.
Right.
So to me, what that says is when there's no more intelligent life around, I'm going back to sleep. That says to me he wants intelligent life. But the vibe I get from his conversation with Mother is that humans aren't good enough. I need something that's on my level. That's why he was so happy to see Mother. Finally, a being that can somewhat rival him in terms of power and intelligence. So maybe the entity is lonely. It's right now it's the only god in the universe. And so it wants a new god friend.
I mean, that could be. But then where does grandmother play into that?
So I think we can take it at her word that she is opposed to the entity.
Yeah.
And even if the entity and grandmother were both created by, let's say, the Technocrats, I still think they can be opposed to each other. Because my thought is that the entity kind of got out of hand. We no longer have control over it. Grandmother, we still kind of have control, but really only over her primary directive, which is ensure the everlasting life of humanity.
Right.
The problem is the way she interpreted that.
Yeah.
And so I think they're opposed. And so if the entity wants intelligent human life, which it can somehow consume and use to create the next level of humanity or the next evolution of whatever it's trying to create, grandmother wants to stop that by devolving us.
Sure.
Basically lower us on the intelligence and sentience scale to the point where we're useless to the entity.
Yeah.
Now where things get, well, before I get to the part where I'm really going to blow your mind, the serpent. I want to talk about that. So actually, before we go to that, you mentioned you had a couple of theories you wanted to float. Did you get to your other one yet?
No, not yet. Not yet. I think Marcus is a necromancer.
Is or has become a necromancer?
Has become a necromancer.
Oh, okay. All right. Tell me more about that.
So we know that helmet is an ancient relic, right? Ancient Mithraic relic. He had that weird thing going on with his eyes. He was obviously floating, right? In the inverse of how Lamia and grandmother kind of float. So I think there's something there as well that we're going to find out about, because he was clearly, well, not clearly, but it seemed like he was resurrected and brought back into some sort of supernatural being.
And so far, the only things we've seen float are Mother, the necromancer,
that's right,
or the serpent, which is basically the The
Part
Necromancer.
That's right, a Necro Serpent. So I think there's something there, and I'm again very interested to see how that goes because, some sort of like second coming of of Marcus. So that was the only other one.
So I definitely think that we're going to see Marcus as some kind of superpowered being.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of it in those terms, that he's a necromancer, but you may not be wrong because the main thing that powers the necromancer is like you said, the dark photon energy.
Right.
Dark photon energy comes out of the planet, into the tree, into the serpent, out of the serpent tree, and into Marcus.
And he has that helmet on, which could be some sort of, conductor for this energy.
Well, you've got to think that helmet somehow allowed the entity to interact with Marcus's brain.
Absolutely.
Reprogram it, make sure that when he wakes up, he is a soldier for the entity.
Yeah. I mean, you can't just float.
No, I've never floated. I've tried.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that was the other thing too that I wanted to get your reaction and response to. So so Marcus is going to be we'll see. Maybe he'll be some form of like zombie, like undead thing. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, me too. And maybe we can get a hint by looking at the serpent. So I kind of took it at face value. The serpent is bad news. It needs to be gotten rid of. So I mentioned to you earlier before we turned the mics on that there was a theory that popped up in the comment section where a lot of people were saying they didn't necessarily agree with me on that point. They said that the serpent had many opportunities to kill Campion and it didn't. And maybe it was even trying to protect him. Like in the final episode, it starts kind of spitting into the water and splashing it. Maybe it was trying to warn him. Mm-hmm. The other thing they mentioned is that it ate the fruit so that way Campion wouldn't. They were kind of protecting him.
Sure.
So were you thinking along the same lines as me? The serpent is just definitely bad. And if so, what's your reaction to hearing maybe that's not the case?
I mean, I feel like if he wanted to harm Campion, he could have. Or it could have. I don't think we know the sex of the serpent. Mm-hmm. Many, many times over, right? They were in that like cage in the cave multiple times. Never did anything to Campion. Granted, it wasn't weaponized at the time.
It did smack him at one point.
It did smack him. He was jealous, right?
Yeah, but that might have just been a baby throwing a tantrum. And it just happens to be a very large baby.
No, that's right. And so I do agree. I mean, at that point when he's basically cornered Campion, when he's fully weaponized, he doesn't kill him, and he could have. Instead, he kind of does the necro scream into the water, and then Mother kind of sings that lullaby or whatever and gets him up into the atmosphere. So I feel like he could have, and maybe that's like Mother's caregiving program was kind of transferred somehow into the serpent because he's
they alluded to the idea that the serpent may have emotions because Mother gave birth to it.
Right. So maybe it knows or recognizes Campion as its sibling, but no, I'm with you. I don't think we know. I think it just like is right. It was just this like force of nature, and it's a very tragic story for the serpent because you don't really find out, and I'm sure we'll find out more in the next season. But like you don't really ever see it do anything bad, like directly. Right. It never. Well, I shouldn't say that. It did liquefy those people in the tank.
Well, we don't know that was the serpent because they found later that the serpent actually couldn't withstand the acid water.
That's true.
So we're led to believe it was not the serpent.
Oh, that's right. I was referring to after the serpent got weaponized. And remember Campion and Drill? Right. Yeah.
You see it make contact on the radar and then you hear everyone scream.
Yeah, so, that's right. So I take that back. It does hurt people after it gets weaponized, but it never hurt Campion. And I feel like it could have. Right. Many times over. And then, again, it's a very tragic end for the serpent before we really understood what its motivations were.
I believe Mother hums the same song to lure it that she sang to Campion when he was a baby. Yeah. To kind of... That's always been unclear what exactly happened there. Yeah. Because it seemed like Campion as an infant wasn't going to make it. Then she hummed that song for him. And we've seen that song have a sort of power. It's what opened up the box that has the seed that turns you into a tree. So I've always wondered if maybe that... Yeah. And we know that the necro scream can explode your brain. So I've always wondered if her humming to Campion as a baby did something to him. Yeah. She also cried at that point, which I don't believe we've ever seen her do again since then. So I've always wondered if something happened to Campion as a baby, and that's why he has this immunity to radiation, which they always mention matter of fact.
Yeah.
Like Vril turns, she begins to radiate. There's that like voice that comes on, you know?
Yeah, that's right.
After she dies, it says, "Get away from this device. It will soon begin to emit radiation poisoning." And they say, Campion will be fine. He's got his immunity.
Because of his immunity. You're right. Again, very matter of fact. But I guess it like helps you and like us as the audience to be like, okay, well, I guess he's immune.
Right.
Or I guess there's
I think
something there.
I don't think the show thinks that we know it's aware. Yeah. Aaron Guzikowski is aware that is an open question for us.
Sure.
And they've given us maybe a couple of hints. But going back to the Serpent, so thinking about it more after after the finale, I think the answer is somewhere in between. I think the Serpent is bad news. Mm-hmm. It was definitely created by the entity. I don't think it was eating the fruit to protect Campion. Sure. I think the fruit came from the tree. I think the fruit was meant for the Serpent, and I think the tree was meant for the Serpent. And this is where I'll get a little bit into the behind the scenes, because unless they're lying to us, they actually explain in the after credits what I said before, which is the tree was drawing power from the planet,
sure,
so it could feed that power to the Serpent.
Sure.
So I think the fruit and the trees were meant for the Serpent. What does it mean that other people ate from that fruit, including Marcus? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it has an effect just like Marcus eating Mother's eyes. They get some small taste of that power. Who knows? Maybe it won't do anything. Maybe it'll poison them.
Yeah.
We'll find out.
We'll find out.
But I think the Serpent may have sentience. They made a few comments about how intelligent it is. And it may also have emotion because it is Mother's child. Sure. And it did seem jealous at one point. So it may just be a tragic figure where the Serpent never intended Campion harm. But at some point, the entity could activate it, and then it could do whatever the entity wanted it to eventually do.
Yeah.
You know, and why didn't it hurt Campion sooner? If the entity has control over the Serpent, why didn't it have it kill Campion early on? Well, if it ultimately wanted to weaponize it by having it eat the tree, he couldn't have it kill Campion, because then Mother might be so angry that she could override her caregiving program and kill the Serpent.
Sure.
So the order may have been keep a low profile, and then when the time is right, eat the tree, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah.
So I think the answer is somewhere in between, where ultimately the entity may have tried to take control of the Serpent and do something nefarious, but that doesn't mean the Serpent wants to do that.
Sure.
It might be a tragic figure where the Serpent doesn't want to hurt anybody, but it's being used by the entity.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you're right.
And that could give us a hint as to what we see from Marcus. Maybe he will be in a similar position. The difference is he can talk. So maybe we'll get to hear from him a little bit where...
Yeah. Well, again, we'll see what kind of state he's in the next season, you know, because is he going to be this like undead thing?
Right.
Or that can't like, I don't know. He's too good of a character for them to not give him the
I
ability
think as
to
an actor, but
yeah,
I'm not going to just walk around like a zombie all
yeah,
season.
no, exactly, yeah. No, you're right. So we'll see. Yeah, we'll see what he says.
Yeah. So that's how I feel about the Serpent. And I mentioned earlier the humans that are partially devolved. I had a thought on that. So if you recall the hooded figure from season 1 that ran in and stole Marcus's tarot cards.
Yeah, from the hands, and it's like ran away.
And then it left out the cards for Mother to find at one point. That's when she scanned it and had that kind of vision. So the stuff that the hooded figure has over his face, to me, that looked like the Serpent's skin. And so I wonder if they'll find out that kind of covering yourself in that skin can protect you from the devolution process.
Interesting.
And if you assume that Grandmother and the entity are opposing forces, then that would make sense, because the entity could be sitting there saying, okay, I need to create a soldier in my battle against Grandmother. You know what? These serpents seem to be immune to her devolution. So I'm going to use the indigenous serpents as the basis for this creature that I'm going to create.
Sure.
So that's why Mother gave birth to a serpent, because for some reason, the serpents on that planet just seem to have some inherent strength against Grandmother. So Botanitech, you turn the serpent into a necro serpent, and humans see that and say, hey, let's cover ourselves in the scales and protect ourselves from the devolution.
I mean, I think there's a scene as well where Marcus is like, hey, it like retains heat, right? The skin of the serpent. So he was like wrapping himself when he first like tries to found that church of followers. So he's wrapping himself in that too. So yeah, I think there's something there too. It is, again, it's biotechnology, right? Or botanitech. So clearly there's properties there that we'll find out more about, hopefully.
I guess any other theories or speculation that we didn't already cover?
Again, I'm very, very eager to see what happens with the other temples, because I'm sure we're going to find more.
Right. They actually told us. So again, another one of these. Aaron Guzikowski, after season 1, he did a bunch of interviews and gave so many hints. I almost wonder if that's why he's not doing as many interviews after season 2.
He was giving away too much.
Ridley Scott was like, you have to stop doing this.
HBO was like, please stop.
But he told us that there are, I don't know, do you want to know this?
Yeah, absolutely.
He told us there are 5 temples on the planet. And that the belief is that those temples kind of contain the hidden truths of Mithraism.
Sure.
So we've now seen 2 temples.
Yep.
In theory, there should be 3 more on the planet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we can assume that there are. So I'm very just interested in seeing more about that, and where do they lead? Do they all have ways into the center of the earth? Because we didn't get to see what was inside the first one.
Yeah. Well, even on the second one, Lucius said, you only went part of the way down.
Yeah.
I'm going all the way.
I'm going all the way down. So that's just fascinating. And I'm excited to see how that pans out. I also want to learn more about this devolution, concept.
Right.
Right. The sea creatures, the other creatures, the different types of sea creatures, right? Because the one that took Tempest Baby looked very different than the one that like Sue kind of confronted when she was taking the leeches.
Which could be
off.
as simple as male versus female.
Yeah,
Who knows?
That's true. And just learning more about the devolution process through eating the fungus and all that other stuff that Grandmother was alluding to. So that'll be fun.
Well, how do you think? Did you agree with my theory that Grandmother is devolving people using the games?
I mean, I'm sure that's something that enables or helps the devolution process. Why else would she give them out the way she did?
Right.
To basically say, like, find a way to pass the time and stay ignorant.
And she even said, this will
shield
shield your mind from the entity's influence.
Yeah, which is, I don't think she can lie, but I think that the entity's influence would go away if you're a devolved human.
Right, exactly.
Right? So that'll be interesting to see as well. So no, I agree with your theory for sure. That's going to help speed that along.
Right. It's at least a step in the process.
Yeah. What about you? What other theories do you have?
The only one that comes to mind, and it's not really a fully formed theory, it's more of a big question, Campion Sturges.
Mm-hmm.
I just wonder if we're going to see more of him and just what his deal is.
Yeah.
We know he created Mother. He supposedly created the Trust. The entity looked like Campion when Mother met the entity in the sim, and that could just be psychological manipulation.
Sure.
It knew that for Mother to trust him, that was the best face to put on. But I just have a big question mark. Is there more to Campion Sturges than we know?
I'm sure there is. I mean, the main character is named after him.
Right.
This guy, like you said, had a huge influence in the technology that we see on the show. Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure he comes back in some form, right?
Yeah, I have to wonder. Yeah. And I was about to say, why isn't he there? If the Atheists came to Kepler 22b, they did have him coughing a lot.
I think he was dying, right?
That was the implication.
Yeah. So yeah, he probably died on Earth, right? Because ultimately what happened with the religious war was like ecological like collapse, right? Like it couldn't harbor life anymore, Earth. So yeah, so maybe he was just getting sick as part of that. I don't know. But I'm sure, like you said, I'm sure he comes back.
Yeah, that was one of the surprises for me this season, is that we didn't see more Campion Sturges.
Yeah.
And I was really hoping to see more Earth flashbacks.
Saw none, actually.
None this season. We saw a couple in season 1. We didn't see any in season 2.
Yeah, you're right. The other thing I really want to see, though, is I go back to these relics and these cards that are just like lying around, which again, nobody acknowledges. Like, pick up a relic. Oh, here's a relic. The thing that kind of blows my mind, though, is, when I think in the first episode, you learn that if anybody finds one of these relics, they're supposed to turn them in.
Right.
So I'm sure there's so much that, somebody already knows because they've been scanning and, evaluating, studying these artifacts. Well, they even knew when Paul was sick, they knew about the parasites with healing properties in the acid water. Yeah. So clearly they're researching this planet. Right. And I don't think we're privy to everything they know yet. Yeah. No, exactly. So I think there's a lot more we're going to find out there. I think the other thing too is that box, not the box, what that Yeah, I
That's
guess
what I've
it's a
been
box,
calling
right?
it.
Yeah, it's
The
a box.
Yeah.
That box.
It's not cubicle.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
a pentagonal box.
Is it pentagonal? Yeah, I didn't want to embarrass myself by trying to guess what shape that
This
was.
guy doesn't know geometry.
But the one that Vita finds
Right.
is different.
Yeah, it has little eyes on it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, right. So it's different than the one that had the tree seed. So I'm sure we're gonna see that resurface.
Yeah.
And we're gonna learn what's in there. So yeah, this ancient like religion, like the mythology, the culture, the relics, I can't wait to see more of that, because this is where, again, like if the show has a vision to wrap it all up, I think to your point, we care more about this now than the like the thought experiment of watching a human being get raised by androids.
Yeah.
That's gone.
Yeah, I know.
That's gone. So I really want to see again more about the civilization and learn about what happened.
Yeah.
So, and again, it's been millions of years. Why was grandmother? Because you have to assume that if grandmother was millions of years old, she was created by something older.
Right.
So, what happened in all the years that have passed?
Yeah.
Is it just a never-ending cycle of humanity destroying itself? Probably.
Yeah. So that's what I wanted to, in terms of theories, that's the other one I wanted to mention. Did you watch my season 1 ending explained video, the Eden cycle?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I did.
So I just wanted to mention, I won't go through that whole thing. I think a lot of that, some parts of that have definitely been disproven, but I think the main thrust of it is still there, which if we go back to season 1, there are a couple things that came up which weren't directly addressed again this season, but Paul finds that cave painting. It's really hard to see what's going on in that painting.
Yeah.
But this is another one where, again, Aaron Guzikowski was just talking pretty freely about it. And he said, yeah, if you look at that painting, it looks like mother and father.
Yeah.
And I didn't think that when I saw it. I just saw two figures, but okay, it's mother and father.
Sure.
And then you think, okay, maybe there was an older version of mother and father. They are androids. There's no reason to think there couldn't be an older version of them. But then he throws the idea out there, Aaron Guzikowski, he goes, you have to ask yourself, is there some kind of schism in space-time? And so it introduces the possibility of time travel.
Perfect.
So when you use the word cycle, so if we go back to the nature of the entity, there's one idea I've had where if there is something strange happening with space-time, maybe the entity, okay, dark photon energy, maybe it doesn't deal with time in the same way we do, or the other forces we're aware of deal with time.
Sure.
So what if this entity has lived through the same events over and over? So for it, when it tells Mother humanity has no future, they're just going to keep destroying themselves over and over. He means that almost literally.
Literally, sure.
Because these events have played out multiple times where Mother and Father come to Kepler 22b. Maybe they plant these embryos that grow humans. Society destroys itself. Okay, they go to Earth. They try again. Society destroys itself. They go back to Kepler 22b. So this entity has lived through it so many times. And maybe it's even evolving itself and improving itself. So when we say that AI can keep improving itself and becoming more and more powerful, maybe it's doing that, but in this kind of like metronome of time.
Yeah.
So for us, it would appear like blink of an eye, all of a sudden it's a god. And that's why it's so unrecognizable. But that's only because it's like ping-ponging back and forth from the present to the future.
Interesting. So here's a thought. The trust, right?
Yeah.
You said that the trust looks like a combination of technology and biology. Could the trust be the entity? And it was brought to this planet by humanity in the first place. And what we see as the trust in season 2 is actually a rudimentary form of the entity early in the cycle before it ping-pongs and turns itself into this like deity.
I mean, if season 3, they turn the trust back on and it tells them, hey, you got to inject me into the planet so I can fight the entity.
Yeah.
But then you realize that by injecting it, you're actually planting the seeds for it to become the entity.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah.
If we're saying that the entity is somehow technological or an AI, maybe that's how it got there. Human beings brought the entity onto Kepler 22b. And that entity seeded life on Earth, right? Like you said.
Right.
So that's where space-time stuff gets really, really fun.
Yeah.
Right? Because where does the loop start and where does it kind of pick up.
Right. Bootstrap paradox.
Yeah.
It has no beginning.
That's right.
Yeah. So
This
are
could
your
be
socks
good.
knocked off?
They're sliding off the feet right now. Oh, this could be good.
Yeah. Oh, and one more thing on that. So going back to Campion saying to Mother, I missed you. I've been alone for so long. You could read that as him saying, I actually knew you at one point.
Sure.
And that could again tie to either the time travel thing, where Mother has been here long in the past, or it could be as simple as Mother was here thousands, millions of years ago and was just reactivated on Earth with different memories and doesn't remember being there.
Yeah.
There could be simpler explanations. I don't think I would have thought time travel if not for that comment from Aaron Guzikowski. So I'm definitely bringing in some outside stuff to the show.
I mean, if he's gonna go, I mean, unless he's trying to just like
He's just messing
distract
with us.
you, yeah, exactly, and send you down a wild goose chase. But I mean, look, it could all the ingredients are there. It's however they bring it all together. You know what's funny after that cave painting, because you see the serpent, right, and it's like kind of like animated, like on the wall when Paul sees it. I was thinking after this season that those weren't embryos, but they could be seeds of the tree, because it kind of looked like the icon on that initial box that Sue opens up.
I'll have to look back at that.
Yeah,
I'll put up a side-by-side picture for you guys.
Yeah. I could be off.
Yeah, the only reason, again, Aaron said, you look at the cave painting, it looks like embryos.
Yeah.
So I'm going based off of him.
True.
He at least was trying to get us to think that, but you're right. It could be the trees.
It could be. Or just going back to the whole the concept of seeding life, right? Like whether through an embryo or the actual seeds of a tree. I think mechanically what you're doing is you're bringing life to one planet.
Right.
In the case of Mother and Father, it was to Kepler 22b with these embryos, or maybe back to Earth. Right, and the cycle continues.
The Eden cycle continues.
Yeah. I mean, that's good info. You got that insider knowledge.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we can start to wrap up by just season 3. Any particular things on your wish list, or just any general thoughts on a possible season 3?
I mean, I would like to think that season 3 is more than just possible, and hopefully it's probable and it's going to happen. I think what I want to see again more. I'm just so curious to learn more about the ancient civilization. You know, the culture that was there, how the technocrats and believers became what they were. Mm-hmm. I want to see more about these rituals. Right, I'm dying to see what the other 5 or however many tarot cards that we haven't seen, what's in them. I think that'll be really interesting to see. And I want to see some sort of fight between mother and grandmother take place. Yeah. I think that'll be pretty badass.
No, my worry is that it might be the first fight we saw was them staring at each other until grandmother fell down. So I don't know how exciting a fight it would be. But the quote unquote fight between mother and the serpent, obviously it wasn't a fight. It was just mother killing the serpent. But that ended up being a more impactful, an interesting sequence than I expected, and a heartbreaking one.
Yeah, it was very sad. It was very sad because, like, again, like she wouldn't have done that had she not kind of dulled her emotions and caregiving program through the veil. But yeah, I think that also it's going to have, I think, far-reaching consequences, right, for everybody on the planet. 1, it took down the EMF. Mm-hmm. 2, she's now like out of commission. Right. 3, the tree is back. All right, so it's already going to be able to, the entity is not only going to have a lightning rod for it to kind of, influence people, but there's no EMF either.
That's so if anything, so it should be signal can get through now.
It should be even more powerful, right? Because it has that conduit with the tree. So I think that the whole Marcus thing, right? The role Marcus is going to play, right? That's going to be really interesting because he doesn't believe, right? He at this point.
Yeah, him and Paul both had a crisis of faith. Yeah. Both of them now see Soul as evil, it sounds like.
Right. But now if he's become another vessel of Soul or the entity, whatever it might be, as this fleshy necromancer. Right. How's he gonna what's he gonna do? Like what kind of force is he gonna be? So I think it was such a great way to end the episode, right? There's huge consequences for the population there. Like the devolution process already starting, right? Campion getting calluses on his hands. The fact that mother is like for now out of commission. Mm-hmm. She's in one of these hibernation pods. Winter has come to the tropical zone. So yeah, there's so many ways that they can take this. So there's a lot that you can, as you can see, I'm excited for season
Yeah.
3. Lots of different directions.
You only have
that
to
it can
wait
take.
like a year at least.
Yeah, I mean, again, assuming that they renew it, they haven't, given the green light yet.
Yeah.
But again, I'm assuming that they're going to renew it.
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, everything you just listed, obviously. I think Mother being in the sim, I think I said this in my review, but I do wonder now that the EMF is down, if the entity can beam into the sim, Mother may meet this sim Campion again.
True.
And there's a possibility they could form a temporary alliance because now they at least have a common enemy of Grandmother.
That's right.
Again, if we take it at face value that Grandmother is truly opposed to the entity.
Yeah.
So yeah, for next season, I mean, again, everything you just listed, I would just add a couple of things we had in season 1 that I want to see come back. And I mentioned them already. I would love more Earth flashbacks, and I would love to see Campion Sturges again. Whether it's the real Campion or not, I would just love to learn more about him. Because he seems like an important figure, and I don't think we fully understand him yet.
Yeah.
Or his intentions. How much of this is going according to plan? How much did he know about Kepler 22b? Did he think, oh, this is a barren planet, and Mother and Father are going to raise these humans, and we're going to be fine? Did he have some inkling that something like this could happen?
I mean, that's a good point because we never really find out why they selected this planet. It's just
I think
like
the implication was that it's a planet that just fit the properties.
It's habitable enough.
It's habitable. Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess you never find that out though. Like, there's no like background into that. It's just we're heading to this planet.
Right.
And I guess we can assume that they were being drawn to it because maybe that's where humanity started, whatever, right? We're going to find that out. But you never really go into that. So that would be interesting to see, right? What kind of...
That makes me wonder if, again, when I say we don't know everything about Campion, maybe he was in touch with this force.
Yeah.
And you would... My feeling is that this is all according to the entity's plan. It wanted humanity to one day come back to Kepler 22b.
Right.
Which would mean Campion had to at least be a pawn in that intergalactic chess game.
Right.
But maybe not. I mean, again, when Mother meets Campion in the sim, he seems very lonely and relieved to see her. Could be psychological manipulation, or could be it truly is lonely and is so happy that this happened, that I didn't know if this was going to happen or not, but great. There is a necromancer here with me now.
But also, I think these cycles probably just take a ton of time. Right, for humanity to get to a point where it can destroy itself.
Yeah,
like I would like to think that you have to be pretty advanced civilization to have the power to destroy yourself, like fully.
Yeah.
So I think these cycles take time. So it could just be lonely because it's been millions of years or whatever for humanity to have gotten to that point where it's coming back to Kepler 22b.
Yeah.
So, but you're right. I mean, we're not done with Campion, right? Because like I think going back to he created the trust. He created a lot of the technology that we see the humans have. We're also told that a lot of the advanced technology that the human beings got was through Mithraic scripture.
Right.
So it clearly, right, there's some sort of connection there that we're going to have to see and learn more about.
Yep. The one other thing I'd say is that this is definitely a show that is ripe for exploration through other mediums. So they did a one-issue comic where it was only 8 pages long and just gave a little glimpse into some of Mother's early days on Kepler 22b that got glossed over in that time skip in the first episode or two. And it gave a little glimpse to Earth where you see kind of the introduction of the Necromancers. And they said there was going to be a second issue in the press release. It never happened.
Never happened.
I have a feeling at this point it's canceled because they said it was going to be a bridge between season 1 and 2. So I have a feeling it's just on hold for now.
Okay.
But I would love to read a book. Or just see something that explores, even if it just goes to Earth and talks about how Earth became a place where Mithraism was so important that the world basically split into atheist versus a Mithraic.
Yeah. No, I think that would be great to see because, we talked very briefly today about the Tooth of Romulus being this like relic of Mithraicism, like all that, like how did that all come to be? And then we learned, in that fleeting moment where it devolves that humanoid. So where did it come from? Like, why did it have that impact or that effect on that humanoid?
Right.
Like, are these real relics that came from space or from Kepler 22b through space-time to Earth? Like, there's so much there that we have no clue.
Yeah.
We have no clue. So,
and in the behind the scenes, by the way, the Tooth of Romulus, they basically said what you're seeing, that little cloud, that's nanotechnology.
Well, That changes things too, then, doesn't it? More botanitech.
Yeah, so they had relics on Earth with nanotechnology that we had no idea. We just thought it was an ancient tooth,
Yeah,
but actually had nanotech inside of it.
interesting. So I think all the more reason to think that we're looking at a like a biotechnological
Yes.
thing, residing within a botanitech planet. I'm going back to my original theory.
Wait, rewind to when you said about the tooth. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I should have said, something to chew on.
Hey,
Teeth.
there you go.
Great
Yeah,
pun.
That's nice. Good one. The other thing too that I'm also, and I know we're trying to wrap. I would love to learn more about what Vril carved into the tree. Just out of curiosity. I don't know if we're ever going to get it.
It seems like they wrote it off as basically diary
Yeah.
entries of a teenage girl.
Yeah.
That's what Paul said. He was like, stupid Earth stuff.
But they also like seem to indicate that Decima like was like a pretty big deal, right? That she knew some stuff, right? That she was like a pretty advanced
Like an engineer, right?
that understood advanced technology. I don't know. That could be cool to see.
That one of the shocking
Yeah.
moments was definitely a lot of the new characters just becoming totally irrelevant by the end of the season.
Quickly. Yeah.
What was his name? Tamerlane?
Yep.
Cleaver, still alive, but just sort of a vegetable.
Yeah. No idea what's going to happen to him.
And Decima.
Yeah. Yeah. And at this point, I guess the last remaining Mithraics are Lucius and Undead Marcus, right? At this point. And Paul, I guess.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Hunter.
Oh, Hunter.
Yeah.
Oh, and then the other.
Yeah, and the
other
children
girls.
have, I guess,
Yeah.
varying degrees of belief at this point.
True. But the rest of them were killed by Vril.
Yeah,
the
I think
actual,
so.
Like clerics and whatnot are killed by Vril.
So one more thing I forgot to bring up. I have to mention this because it was tweeted at me. And you can follow me on Twitter at OneTakeGill. And just like you see here, you tweet at me, you can end up on the show.
There you go.
So I had a tweet from Lauren Sperry. So check this out. I'll put an image up on the screen, but let me set it up first. So
Set it up.
back in season 1, when we see the flashback to Marcus or Caleb and Mary before they became Marcus and Sue, and they bust into that Mithraic place where they found the android that changed their faces, and where they killed Paul's parents, they see a painting. I want to show you the painting. You tell me if this looks familiar at all.
That's amazing. I mean, and this is the thing that we haven't really touched on today, right? Is the actual kind of like Christian, like religious iconography. Again, that reverse crucifixion.
Yeah.
The floating Marcus at the end, right? The inverse of Lamia. But yeah, I mean, look at that. They foretold a lot of this stuff. You see the Sol Invictus here.
Yep.
You have people like that look to be kind of performing a ceremony.
Yeah, so it looks like this was I take this to be maybe on Earth, part of the Mithraic religion, this was a way of punishing people. And that's what you're seeing done here. I mean, that guy definitely looks like he's being tormented. I would say he doesn't seem like if this was a voluntary process, I feel like this would be tough, but he would have like a blissful smile on his face. Or at least he would be a little bit more calm.
Sure.
Like the person who took the, when we see that card scanned by Father and that person turns into a tree, that seemed like a voluntary process to me.
Yeah.
They knew they were sacrificing themselves. Maybe back on Kepler 22b, this was a process they did, just like the tree, to give themselves over to Sol.
Sure.
Maybe they even wore the Punisher helmet. And that was a way of giving Saul a soldier in his undead army.
Yeah.
But on Earth, it's just become a ritual. They don't exactly know why they do it, and they use it as a means of punishment.
Because it was handed down, right? Telephone game over space-time.
Yeah.
It could also explain why, like, Lucius did it, right? Like, why did he hang him up?
Well, like he's done this before. Like he's aware of this ritual.
Exactly. It seemed like a thing that he knew to do. Granted, at that time, he was also probably being influenced by Sol, right?
Yeah.
Because that part was
But he
pretty clear
did
too.
see it. When Lucius did that, it didn't seem like he knew it was going to... He didn't seem like he knew what it was going to result in.
True.
It sounded like he thought he was just punishing Marcus.
Yeah.
And if that was the purpose of this ritual on Earth, it would make sense that that was his understanding of it.
Yeah.
So that's why I look at this and I think on Earth, like you said, game of telephone, this is a way to punish people. You're not on Earth anymore. You're on Kepler 22b. Now it's a way of adding on to Sol's undead army.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, how cool is that?
That's really cool. Wait, so this is a scene or like a screenshot from one of the early scenes? And
I think it's episode 2 or 3. Whenever we see the flashback, I believe it was episode 2 where we see them actually escape Earth.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome.
Unless this is a Photoshop that I've fallen for. But
I mean, we'll have to go back and confirm.
I will double check before I release this.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. Okay, so on that note, now I think we can wrap up. So first off, Shataz, thank you for joining us here
Thank you
on
for
the
having
OneTake
me.
podcast. You're the only person I know, IRL, that is physically in a close proximity that I can actually talk to about this show.
Yeah.
So this was great. And if there is an announcement of season 3, then we'll have to get together again and talk more Raised by Wolves. And maybe we'll have you on for some other stuff.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Definitely. Okay, with that, so if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more. And, Shataz hasn't done this in a while, so if you like it, that's just going to put a big smile on his face. You want to see Shataz smile, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Why not? Please.
Yeah. I really need this right now.
I really need this right now. No,
So,
honestly, this was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for bringing this. What is this? This is a South African.
The South African. Hold on.
This pairs very nicely with Raised by Wolves.
It does. Yeah. The South African Stellenbosch.
All right, 2016.
Yeah. Very good.
So there you go. All right, like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and also I should mention that if you don't like to see us and you just want to hear our voices, this is also available on any podcast app, Apple, Google, Spotify. Just search OneTake, one word, or see the links in the description. You can subscribe, and then you don't have to see this ugly mug anymore. Yeah, I know you all want to see Shataz, but he just won't be on every episode. So, okay, with that, thank you for watching, and see you on the next OneTake.